This is Hydroplane 85, a year in review, and is brought to you by Ford and your local Ford dealer, and by the new Walker Advantage muffler. It puts rust at a disadvantage.
Hi, everybody. I'm Don Poyer, along with Jim Hendrick. We're in San Diego, the last site for the 1985 Unlimited Hydroplane Racing season. And what a year it has been, Jim.
It has been a year that the turbines have set the pace. Look out, 1986. More races, more turbine engines. One boat threatened to dominate it all, and we've had a lot of adjustments to make in the thunderboat sport.
For the next hour, we're going to look back through 1985. What an incredible year it has been. So stay with us. 1985 was down in Miami, Florida. It featured a new Miss Budweiser. It also featured some sponsor changes. Miller American went aboard with Lucero Muncie Racing Industries, formerly the Miss Atlas Van Lines, and 7-Eleven came aboard to sponsor Steve Woomer's turbine boat.
That's right, and the featuring of Miss Budweiser didn't actually happen because in testing the very first time on Lake Washington, the Budweiser pulled away from the dock. Jim Croftfield had an explosion behind him. That set the crew back. Then they had a long trek, and they didn't make it till race morning, did not qualify, but did test the very next day when nobody was there.
It was tough for the crew. They had to drive the boat from Seattle over 3,000 miles down to Miami for that first race of the season. And without the Budweiser racing, we had a field of 6 boats for Miami in 1985. A boat that many thought would do well was the Executone Telephones. It was probably the most prepared crew after testing all winter long. I'm with Scott Pierce, the driver of the Executone Telephones. And Scott, I would imagine next to a cheeseburger, the dearest thing to your heart was the win in Miami.
Well, it was a very, very special time in my life. You know, we'd worked awful hard for many years, and we finally were able to get a good sponsor with Executone, a good crew, a good owner, a good boat. And we were able to go down there and put a win together, and it meant a lot to me. Of course, my father was in the sport for so many years, and he wasn't able to win. So it was a very emotional time, and I still get emotional when I think about it now. But it, you know, with all the things that have transpired during the year, it's a very, very nice time.
First win ever for Scott, and first win for Executone Telephones. Let's go back to Miami and the final. Very low right now in speed is the 7-Eleven to stay inside the gun. He just made it. A good start for the 7-Eleven. But in the meantime, on the inside is the Executone Telephones with Scotty Pierce. Going into the east turn, a better speed for the Executone Telephone. Scotty Pierce hit the start right on the button. A good high-speed open lane going into the east turn. In second place, 7-Eleven with Steve Reynolds. Third place, Leif Borgeson and the Kenny Toyota Volvo. Fourth place is Andy Coker in the American Speedy Printing. You can see him on the inside coming around the turn now past the exit buoy and down the back chute. Scott Pierce finds himself in first place in the finals here in Miami. And there is no sign of the Miller American. I don't see Chip Hanauer out on the course anywhere, so it's a 4-boat race here in the finals. And Scott Pierce steady ahead of Steve Reynolds. Third place, Kenny Toyota. And we're getting down to crunch time. Crunch time for the drivers, too. Very choppy in the east turn now as those 4 boats are kicking it up. And Steve Reynolds in the 7-Eleven is going dead in the water. Reynolds' day will come to an end in the east turn here at Marine Stadium. He had hoped to pick up where he left off, taking that victory in Houston in the last race of 1984, but this is where it'll end in 1985, and he'll have to wait until Syracuse next Sunday. Steve Reynolds waving that he's all right. Yeah, that says it all. For Scotty Pierce, 5 years of driving slower boats, doing everything, driving the truck on the engines. He is on his way to his first career victory in the Unlimiteds and the first victory for the sponsor, Executone Telephones, a winner in Miami.
Great field winner, baby!
Scotty, take your helmet off. You did it, young man. You did it. First ride in the Executone Telephones, and you already got yourself a championship here in Miami.
5 long years.
5 years for this program. You're right, for Executone
5
Telephones.
long years.
How did it feel out there?
Oh, it felt great. I was so happy I could cry.
Go ahead and cry. There's nothing wrong with that.
My dad, he's up there in heaven. I wouldn't be here without you, and I love it. I just love it. My wife, she's done everything, supported me. We had no money.
Now we have some money.
Personally, I think that was the most meaningful interview I've ever done in my life, Scotty.
Well, it was a very, very meaningful moment to me. You know, we have a lot of highs and lows in life, and that was a definite high, and it's one I'll cherish for the rest of my life.
What about 1986?
Well, as everyone I think knows at this point, we're going to repower with turbine engines. It seems to be the wave of the future, and we're very excited about it. And we want to continue to keep Executone in the front of an unlimited hydroplane racing.
Okay, Scotty Pierce. Jim?
Bernie Little and Budweiser always trying to better the sport, and they've had a lot of innovations. It had to hurt not to be competing in your own hometown race, Miami.
Yes, Jim, we really felt bad about not making the Miami race. However, we went on to win the next race at Syracuse, and that was really something for us, since we really spent the whole year for safety. And for us to win that race was really something. But we knew we couldn't compete too strong this year with the competition with the turbine 4,000 horsepower. So we dedicated 1985 to keeping our driver alive. Hopefully the other drivers in the other camps will see the closed-in cockpit, and I think it'll really work and do something for the sport.
Thank you, Bernie. Don?
Jim, in this week's show, we're looking back, asking the principals in the Unlimiteds what they remember most of 1985, their most memorable moment. Scott Pierce.
Well, the most memorable moment in my year for 1985 was about January 2nd, when I signed a contract with Executone, and finally, after 4 long, hard years, I knew that I was with a competitive program and a competitive company, and I felt that we could go out and do some good in '85, and I feel that we've done that.
1985 in the world of unlimited hydroplane racing. The second stop, Syracuse, New York.
And the boats, of course, having run the first race at Miami and saltwater, welcomed the fresh water of Onondaga Lake.
It was a tough trek, though, for the crews. They had to go from Miami to Syracuse, New York in less than a week.
And as if the travel wasn't enough, the Miller American crew again suffered engine damage, this time severe damage to the boat as well. Jim Henrik reminisces with co-owner Jim Lucero.
A great year, Jim Lucero, for your team, but Syracuse was no indication that it would be a good year.
You know, starting out the season in Miami, being a saltwater race, we had some problems down there, and after that race, we kind of gathered ourselves back together. Going into Syracuse, we thought we had a pretty good handle on things, but we got there, and right off the trailer, we run the boat a little bit, and within less than a lap, we ended up exploding a motor, sawing the boat in half, and things looked pretty bleak at that time, particularly in light of the fact that it was a Miller-sponsored event, and we wanted to do real well there, and to go home kind of with our tail between our legs was the low point of the entire season for us.
But the Miller American crew was not the only team to suffer major problems, as you see here in Heat 1A. Watch on the first lap on Onondaga Lake. You saw the starting line and you heard the gun. A good start by everybody, especially the man on the right of your screen, Jerry Hopp in the Aboyo Berta Beef Jerky, qualifying at 108 miles per hour. He's in first place and holding on to lane number 1. Executone Telephone second, and the 7-Eleven with Steve Reynolds in third place. Around the north turn, 7-Eleven has gone dead in the water down in the north turn. More problems for that turbine-powered boat. Reynolds waving that he's all right, but anyway, let's go back to the race. Aboyo Berto still in first place with Jerry Hopp, one of the slower qualifiers, but running very well. Executone Telephones on the left of your screen. That's the Kenny Toyota Volvo on the right. Look out, the boat's going to flip. The Kenny Toyota Volvo has flipped going down the back chute. Leif Borgeson, the driver. It looks like the boat has landed right side up. Let's locate the driver. There he is on the left of the boat, Leif Borgeson. The race has been stopped. The flares have been shot. As you see the red flag, the boats will return immediately to the pits. The Executone Telephone going back. Yes, the boat has landed right side up. The wing is virtually gone. The cockpit is gone. The rescue boat is now in place to pick up Leif Borgeson. We have no idea his condition at this point, and we will try to update you as soon as possible. Let's go back and try to get a better idea of what happened. Kenny Toyota Volvo on the right of the screen, behind the rooster tail of the Executone Telephones. The right spots and goes up into the air, and then that huge mass of air under the boat flips it over. They call it a blowover in unlimited hydroplane racing. The boat lands literally on its back and then bounces, landing upright where it came to rest. The driver, Leif Borgeson, 39 years old, making his return to unlimited hydroplane racing after 10 years on the beach, suddenly in the middle of a catastrophe. He surfaced on the left side of the boat. And as we said, we will get an update on his condition as soon as possible. The Syracuse rescue team working professionally and very quickly here on Onondaga Lake, bringing Leif Borgeson back to the dock. Here's Scott Pierce, the driver of the Executone telephones, consoling his wife, Jamie Pierce. You've got to remember, whenever there's an emergency like this, it affects the entire community of unlimited hydroplane racing. They're much like a family. Steve Reynolds, you see, over trying to get word. And the boat itself, the tips of the sponsons ripped away and is sinking. Here's Leif Borgeson being carried to the ambulance.
And now today, as you can see, Leif Borgeson is in much better condition, with the exception of maybe some crutches. You're almost back to normal. What exactly were all the injuries you suffered?
Well, hitting the water that hard, Don, as you know, it's kind of like a brick wall. And I was ejected from the boat when it re-entered the water after the 360 flip. And I pretty much wiped out the forward part of the boat. And I had a tremendous amount of force pushed against my right leg, which dislocated the hip and tore a piece of the bone off at the top of the femur. And also it caused some nerve damage in the sciatic nerve, which has caused me some foot problems getting it working. But we're back on the mend now, and they did an operation back in Syracuse, and I'm out in Seattle, of course, and I'm going through physical therapy and that, and working real hard to physically come back. I feel a lot better now. It took a good probably a month before I really started to gain improvement as my health was concerned. I lost a lot of weight and had black eyes and all the normal stuff that happens to a boat racer when they fall out of one of their boats.
Okay. It was a dramatic moment, of course, in that race in Syracuse. We wondered, can we have good racing the rest of the day? What will happen? Well, it turns out he, too, was one of the best of the year. Let's watch.
The principals, the Executone telephones, and the new Miss Budweiser. Here's the final lap. Look at this. Krautfeld holding on to lane number 2. You can hear the crowd in the background getting to see some wonderful racing. As Krautfeld, a 5-time national champion in the limited level, driving the very famous Country Boy limited boat in the 225 cubic inch class. He's in first place now, ahead of Scott Pierce. He's still holding in lane number 2, however, so Scott Pierce has the lane if he can get the horsepower and the speed going down the back chutes to catch the Budweiser. Rough ride on the part of the Budweiser. Things like that you won't see once it's dialed in a little bit better. Riding a little heavy on the sponsons, as we said earlier. The skid fin digging in. You see the Oboyo Berto. It is dead in the water in the south turn. The Budweiser having to go wide. Executone telephone on the inside, and now it's a sprint for the finish line. Executone telephones, lane number 1. The Bud in lane 2. Here comes the finish between Pierce and Krautfeld. It goes to the Budweiser, winner of E2A. Later in the winner take-all final, thunderstorms threatening the Syracuse area. The Bud in lane 1, Executone telephones lane 2, the 7-Eleven Steve Reynolds in lane 3. He is called for cutting off the Executone in the first turn. Coming out of that same turn, 7-Eleven in first place. It is ruled that Reynolds cut off the Budweiser as well, as the Bud went way up on the left sponson. Somehow, Jim Krautfeld, the driver of the Bud, was able to keep the engine running, and he was able to win the final heat, the first victory for the new Miss Budweiser in 1985.
From central New York State, the circuit then moved west to the Motor City in 1985, race number 3, Detroit, Michigan. And there is where the Miller American really began its domination of 1985.
And it showed the way that the turbines, like the 7-Eleven and, of course, the Miller American, they showed the way that these boats, if they're going to compete, may all have to go turbine. That may be the trend. We don't know.
What about the water?
The Detroit River, well, it's supposed to be our most treacherous course, but this year, 1985, that's not so. We got all the action in on a given Sunday. We didn't get blown out till Monday like we did a couple of years ago.
Again, back to a most memorable moment. Certainly Leif Borgeson of the Kenny Toyota won't forget the blowover in Syracuse. But looking back over the summer, what was one of the highlights of his season?
The most exciting thing for me in this year was basically coming back into the sport after 10 years and winning the first heat. That was a real pat on the back, I thought, for my crew and owner.